So Archaeopteryx is the best example for the birds that are present nowadays. So Archaeopteryx, they are the winged dinosaurs. Organisms always evolve according to the habitat in which they are living. There are some organs which are present in almost all the vertebrates in the embryonic stage, and according to their habitat they get lost when they become an adult, right? Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on chapter 7, that is evolution of second PUC biology. I'm Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidyashram Pre-University College, Mysore, Temple of Excellence. So in the previous session of this chapter, we had discussed about the survival of fittest, right? In the theory of evolution, we had discussed how some organisms, in spite of being in a densely populated condition, they survive by overcoming almost all the environmental factors. They tend to survive and live for a longer time, whereas some which are not fit to survive in this particular environment, they tend to perish. And we also came to know that the survival of the fittest, this idea was actually given by Charles Darwin. So Charles Darwin, he used to travel around the world in a ship called as the HMS Beagle. And also one more scientist, that is Alfred Wallace, he used to travel around. So when he visited a particular island called the Malaya Archipelago Island, he also came to know that how the organisms, they tend to survive among the different populations. So even Charles Darwin also, he came to know about it when he visited, that is certain islands, when he visited while traveling around the world. So all that we came to know about in the previous session. In today's session, we shall understand what are the actual evidences that has been put forward in order to prove about evolution. We all have been hearing or reading everywhere about evolution, how the earth evolved, how the life, that is the living forms or the life actually started in this earth, and how they evolved during the course of time. Because if we take the examples of we human beings only, we know that we have evolved from the monkeys or the primates, right? We have evolved from them. But what are the evidences? So some evidences, you just can't tell people like that, right? There has to be some evidence for that, or some documents for that. So what are those evidences which actually prove that evolution actually exists, and it is because of evolution the present day organisms that are there on this earth, which exist as it is now, is because of the evolution that has taken place for millions of years together. So there are some evidences which are there. So we shall study about those evidences in today's session. So to begin with, we shall learn what are the evidences for evolution. There are different types of evidences which has been put forward for evolution, like how microbes might have evolved, how humans might have evolved, how animals might have evolved, or how plants also, because of certain breeding programs and also because of evolution, that is, in order for the plants to survive in harsh and extreme environments, they would have evolved. So what are the evidences for that? So based on that, they have divided evidences into different categories, that is paleontological evidences. So paleontology is nothing but wherein we study about the fossils, like how did we come to know dinosaurs existed? Were human beings there during the dinosaur era? No, they were not there. So if human beings were not there, then where is the idea of photography and all that? Now we get a neat image of the dinosaurs, right? How did people come to know that dinosaurs looked like that? It is because of the fossils that was left by the dead animal. So because of that, so that is nothing but paleontological evidences. Next is embryological evidences. So embryological evidences means by looking at the embryo, there are certain distinctive characters which will be present when the organism is in the embryo state, but they would have been lost when they reach the adult stage. So those evidences we shall study. Then anatomical and morphological evidences. So anatomical and morphological evidences can be studied by comparing the bone structures, the organs of the organisms, all that. So if there is some similarities, we might understand maybe we would have evolved from so and so organism. So that is how anatomical and morphological evidences will help. So morphological evidences as well. Morphology, just compare the fingers of human beings with that of the primates. Of course, primates don't have a thumb finger, right? But rest four fingers which are there, they do have them, and they look almost exactly like that of the human beings. The way they use those fingers, all that is similar to that of human beings. So scientists might have believed that humans might have evolved from the other primates that are there. So therefore anatomical and morphological evidences. Then coming to biochemical evidences. Biochemical evidences, nowadays anatomical evidence nor morphological evidence is of that importance. Why? Because now people go in for the genes, because whatever work is done keeping the genes, it will give 100% accurate result. So that is why. So biochemical evidences, maybe checking for which gene produces or which kind of protein. If that organism also the same gene is present that is producing the same kind of protein, then we will understand there might be a connection or evolutionary connection between between those two organisms, right? So that is how they go in for the biochemical evidences. Next, talking about breeding evidences. So breeding evidences, like we have a variety of plants that is there. So there are some plants which were present earlier. So it is because of the man's breeding program that he has done during the course of time. Nowadays, the plant that we see, we have those such kind of plants which are not there before. But where would have these new plants come from? Of course, they can't just come out spontaneously, right? It is not possible, right? So it should have come out from some other plant. So therefore, to understand that, there are certain breeding evidences. Next is anthropogenic evidences. So anthropogenic evidences is because of the use of chemical fertilizers, pollution in the environment, because of the industries, vehicle and all that. Because of that also the organisms evolve in order to survive, because at the end of the day, according to Darwin, it is survival of the fittest, right? So if the fittest has to survive, then they have to evolve. Even we human beings, we have to evolve daily. We tend to change our behavior, we tend to change the way that we think, because we need to fit into the society where we are living in, right? So that in the same way, animals also, or be it any plant, if they have to change. Like earlier, hundreds of years ago, there was no pollution and all that, because the vehicles that were there were just countable numbers. But nowadays, can you see more than the people? I think the vehicles might be there on the roads, right? So how much pollution we are making to the environment? How can these organisms survive in that kind of environment? They tend to adapt, right? So that is nothing but anthropogenic evidences, wherein the organisms tend to adapt according to the environmental changes. So that is about anthropogenic evidences. So in this particular session of today, each of these evidences which I have mentioned here, we will study in detail about these one by one. So to begin with, we shall start with paleontological evidences. So what did I tell you about paleontological evidences? It is nothing but the fossils, right? So paleontological evidences is nothing but the remains of hard parts of life formed in the rocks. So you might have seen when you watch the Discovery Channel or the National Geographical channels or any historical channels, when you watch, you might have seen the anthropologists, they actually start digging the soils and searching for old remains and all that very neatly. They'll be holding a brush and cleaning all the soil particles and all that very neatly. Why? Because in those rocks or in those soil region, there would have been the remains of the animals. Say for example, dinosaur. How did we come to know about the dinosaur? People found bones of the dinosaur, right? And when they found the intact full skeleton of dinosaur, they came to know, okay, dinosaur looks like this. That is how we have the image now. Otherwise, images wouldn't have been available. We would have not even known that something called as dinosaurs existed in those dinosaur era, right? So that is how nothing but the paleontology. So here remains or the hard remains of any hard part of organism. So organs and all, they cannot be preserved, but the bones and all that, which are the hard parts of the organism, they get preserved. So sometimes you can ask me, ma'am, how did people know that pteridophytes, that is the ferns, how did they exist during the dinosaur era? So ferns were present during the dinosaur era. Even gymnosperms were also present during the dinosaur era, because in any of the book, if you see, whenever they draw a dinosaur, no, they would have drawn this cycles, which is a gymnosperm, then certain pteridophytes and all, they would have drawn. Why the drawing? Why that illustration? Because they knew that during those time these plants were also growing. How did they know? Because I told you, the remains of hard parts of life forms will be found when studying about paleontological evidences. Plants, do they have these hard parts in them? Do plants have skeletons, like how animal skeletons, bones and all will remain for thousands of years like that only without degrading? But is it possible with the case of plants? So in the plants, what happens is imprints will be left over. Say for example, a plant part falls on a rock, and on that rock the wind will carry all the sediments, which is nothing but the sand, dust and all that. It will start depositing on the rock. So once it starts depositing on the rock, the print of the plant for many years, it will get formed on the rock. So very beautiful pteridophyte leaf print will be found. Then they will go in for carbon dating and all that to find out which era they were present and all that. Then that is how they find out the evidences of these particular organisms, especially in the case of plants which do not have any hard part. So here what happens here is the rocks. So the rocks will start to form sediments, and when a cross section of the earth's crust is taken, it indicates that the arrangement of the sediments one over the other during the long history of earth. So they will know, maybe by looking at the texture of it or whatever, they will know like how many layers of sediments might have sat on that particular rock where the organisms remains are there. So they form like this. That is why you don't get the bones and all that. Imagine you would have found, if the sediments would have not settled and all of that, the bones and the remains would have been found everywhere on the top of the earth, right? But now it is buried deep inside the earth crust, because layers of sediments of rocks, sand, other debris, everything would have settled on top of it. And this is how we can find that different aged rock sediments, they contain fossils of different life forms. So based on how many layers of sediments have been settled, we can predict like how many years has this fossil been remained preserved in that particular rock or the earth's crust, we can understand. And some of them appear similar to the modern organisms. So when we see, and the best example is that of the dinosaur. So we can take dinosaurs as an example. Why? Because if you see the dinosaurs and the reptiles, they look similar. Just see the face of a lizard. Simple example, if I take a lizard, when we see a lizard, we feel somewhat some similarity with that of the dinosaur, right? The tail of the lizard. Say for example, we have Brachiosaurus here. So Brachiosaurus. So Brachiosaurus, if you see, it looks like a lizard itself, right? And also these reptiles, they have, these dinosaurs and all that, they have a similarity with the other reptiles that are existing today. When you see crocodiles, when you see alligators, snakes, lizards, garden lizards, geckos, everything, all these reptiles, chameleons. When I look at something, I feel chameleon looks like somewhat like Stegosaurus. So the desert lizards, the spiny desert lizards that are there, they resemble these dinosaurs itself, right? So because now we are talking about the morphological resemblance here. So they look like each other. So they might believe that, from these dinosaurs itself, the reptiles might have evolved. So present day reptiles which are there, the crocodiles, alligators, all those reptiles which are there, they might have evolved from these dinosaurs itself during the course of evolution for many years. So we have like that Stegosaurus. Then we have Triceratops. That is Triceratops. When you see them, don't you feel they look like the rhinoceros? So it is like that. I'm just talking about the morphology. I'm not going in for the biochemical or the anthropological studies and all that. So the morpho anatomical studies and all that. I'm just looking at the morphology and just imagining. It looks almost like the rhinoceros, right? So even this Tyrannosaurus also, they look like some sort of that is few reptiles. They look like some reptiles. And crocodilian exactly from crocodilian itself, the all the crocodile species might have evolved. And when we looked at Archaeopteryx, so Archaeopteryx is the best example for the birds that are present nowadays. So Archaeopteryx, they are the winged dinosaurs. So they are the only dinosaurs which are capable of flight. They were able to fly, and they had claws, like how birds, they have claws, like that is the forelimbs of birds, it has claws so that it can cling on to the branches. Just like that, Archaeopteryx also, they had claws and they had beak, exactly like the birds, they had beak, and they had wings, feathered wings. And Archaeopteryx wings, at the tip of the Archaeopteryx wings also, they were claws. But nowadays birds, they don't have claws in their, that is at the tip of their wings, but Archaeopteryx has. But when you look at Archaeopteryx as a whole, morphologically, they resemble a bird. So birds might have evolved from the Archaeopteryx. So these are some of the paleontological evidences. So how did they come to know that something like Archaeopteryx was present? It is because of the remains that were found by the archaeologists who were digging the soil or sediment, searching for the old organisms that were dwelling on this earth. Like this, even Pteranodon. Pteranodon is also species which can fly. So they also look almost, if you can see the flying squirrel and all, looks like this. That is Pteranodon. So they might have evolved. There might be a connection between these. So these are nothing but based on these remains that are there, that is paleontological remains, scientists were able to find the similarities between the present day organisms with that of those which were present millions of years ago. So next, talking about the study of fossils. So a study of fossil in different sedimentary layers indicates the geological period, because I told you types of layers of sediments that come and settle. Based on that, it is easy for us to identify. So when you dig into a earth's crust, can you find all the layers in the same color? No, right? Because one layer would be different color, one layer. So understanding the different types of textures or types of sediments, we can say how much era has passed to that particular earth, how many years have passed, we can understand. So therefore here also we can study the fossils in different sedimentary layers, and when we look into the different types of sedimentary layers that have settled on the fossil, we can understand what is the geological period, or during which period these organisms were dwelling. So or in which they actually existed. So that can be understood. And such a study, such a kind of fossil study actually showed that life forms varied over time, and certain life forms are restricted to certain geological time span. Do we have dinosaurs now? No. Do we have Archaeopteryx now? It is not there. Or we can take the example of some marsupials which were present there. So Tanzanian wolf, what we call. Nowadays it is not there. But like that only, there are other types of wolf that is present now, right? So but those wolves are not dead, which means that some organisms are meant for some geological period itself. Who knows? Again, after many hundred to millions of years, we human beings, we might become like dinosaurs. We might get perished from this earth, and some other organisms might take our place because of evolution process. We can't say. So that is how the species of an organism is actually restricted to certain time span. Hence, new life forms have arisen at different times in the history of the earth, and this is called as the paleontological evidences. So we have different life forms. So there have been some life forms which might have existed hundreds of years ago, but now it is not there. The best example is some wild fruits. Even now when they tell, have you tasted this kind of fruit which was there during their time, but now it is not at all available, those wild kind of fruits, they have completely perished. Means during that geological period that fruits might have been there, but now it is not, they're not available because of certain reasons. So all these, even animals also, during certain geological periods they would have survived, but they get perished in that geological period, and in their place some other organisms take over, or those animals itself, they get evolved in order to form a new organisms. Like this, that is how they become extinct. So that is about paleontological evidences. Next is the embryological evidences. So embryological evidences was proved by Ernest Haeckel. So Ernest Haeckel, what he did was he made some observations on some of the features of the organism during the embryonic stage. So if you look at the embryonic stage or the fetus of humans and the embryonic stage of be it any marsupial animal, a dog or something, they have some similarities. They look almost the same, right? But as they grow old, or as they become adult, or once they turn into the baby form, they will completely change, right? Embryos will start to look similar, but they completely change when they develop into a fetus, right? So that is how, based upon observation of certain features, especially during the embryonic stage, which is common to all vertebrates. So almost all the vertebrates. What are vertebrates? They are nothing but those organisms that come under the chordates, right? So those organisms which have a backbone, which have a vertebral column. So if you take all those organisms, be it a dog, be it any of the marsupials, as I said, kangaroo, or any reptiles, fishes, birds, which are all vertebrates. If you see human beings, so the embryo almost looks similar. Can you see? They look similar. Because they look similar, will the fish embryo turn into a human fetus? No, right? When they grow old or when they mature, they look different, completely different. But they share a common feature when they are in the embryonic state. So that is what Ernest Haeckel actually meant. So the features during the embryonic stage are common to all vertebrates that are absent in adults. So those features which are present and which are common in all vertebrates during the embryonic stage, they become lost or they become absent when those organisms reach a adult stage. The best example that we can take is the embryo of all the vertebrates, including the human. So all the vertebrates, they have a vestigial gill slit. So if you can see, we have taken the example of fish, reptile, then bird, and a human embryo. So if you see the embryo, you can find gill slits. Can you see here? Gill slits in fishes in the embryonic stage. I'm talking about the embryonic stage. In the reptiles also they have a gill slit, and in birds also they have gill slits, as well as in humans also they have gill slits. But fishes, gill slits will remain even in the adult stage, right? Because fishes live in water, they need the gill slits for breathing. Likewise, some of the reptiles also, which dwell on water as well as on land, some reptiles also have the gill slits, but most of them it is absent. But few of them they'll have the gill slit. Birds will not have gill slits because they don't need gill slits. And likewise, human beings also, we also don't have gill slits. Why? Because we are not water dwellers. We are terrestrial creatures, right? We don't need gill slits for breathing. So that is why when human beings, the embryo of humans, when they enter into the fetal stage, the gill slits will be lost. Imagine if the gill slits had remained, like fishes, we also would have had in the sides gills, right? But do we have them? No, because they get lost during the adult stage. So that is what Ernest Haeckel meant. So almost what he said was, almost all the embryos, they look similar, or the organs of they have a common organ when they are in the embryonic stage, but those organs get lost when they are in the adult stage. Likewise, you can see tail, fishes, tail. Then even the reptiles also have tail, which will be retained even in their adult stage. Even the birds also have tail, which will be retained. Even we human beings also have tail. Are the tail there? Yes, we have a tail-like structure called as coccyx, which is not visible. Very rarely it is seen in the human beings. So humans, we also have tail. As the fetus develops, it gets diminished or it is lost. So that is what Ernest Haeckel actually meant. So the embryos of all vertebrates, including humans, they develop a row of vestigial gill slits, just vestigial gill slits, which are present just behind the head. Can you see the head region? Just behind the head region, they will be present. Behind head. So just behind the head, but it is a functional organ only in the case of fish and not found in any other adult vertebrates. So, other adult vertebrates such as the reptiles, birds or human beings, when they grow, these gill slits will not be found, but it is only retained in the fishes. Why it gets retained in the fishes? Because fishes, they need to live in water, so it will be retained. For us, it is a vestigial organ, it is an organ of no use, right? That is why they are not found in human beings or any other reptile other than the fishes. So here, one more thing, we have appendix, right? This appendix is a waste organ in a body, it is not required. Who knows, maybe after hundreds or thousands of years, even human beings, we might lose our appendix. Adult human beings, we might lose our appendix. Appendix won't be limited only to that of the embryonic stage. In the fetal stage, appendix might get lost. We can't say because of evolution. Anyway, it is a organ which is of no use in the body. That is why. So that is how embryological evidences actually helps the scientists to prove about evolution. Next, talking about one more scientist. So Ernest Haeckel, we talked about it. What he said that there are some organs which are present in almost all the vertebrates in the embryonic stage, and according to their habitat, they get lost when they become an adult, right? So one more scientist, that is Ernest von Baer. So he said that the embryos never pass through the adult stages of other animals. So what it means is that the embryos, they don't pass into an adult stage, they directly develop into a fetus and then into the adults. So here, so he tried to prove that maybe what Ernest Haeckel said might be wrong. So he said, he noted that embryos, they never pass through the adult stage of other animals. That was his theory. But so Ernest von Baer, he said that the embryo of any of the higher organisms or any of the vertebrate will not resemble the adult organism. That is obviously true. Only there is a resemblance between the embryos of different organisms. Say for example, like how Ernest Haeckel said, there is a similarity in the organs of some of the embryos of the vertebrates, right? Or the those animals having the vertebral column. But Ernest was said that the embryos do not resemble the adults of other organisms. That is also true to some extent. So these were the embryological evidences put forward by two scientists, Ernest Haeckel and Ernest von Baer. So we shall move on to the next evolutionary evidence, that is anatomical and morphological evidence. So here they say that there is some anatomical and morphological similarities as well as dissimilarities among organisms, that is among different organisms when compared to those organisms of today and those which existed in the earlier years. So obviously there are some anatomical similarities as well as differences as well, right? So anatomical similarities, like say for example, when we talk about anatomical similarities, we saw about crocodilian, right? So crocodilian represents almost, or anatomically it resembles the today's crocodile or alligators or whatever is there, that is those reptiles which are present today in this present earth, right? So they have a resemblance. So it can resemble, along with resemblance, they also have some dissimilarity as well. Say dissimilarity when I talk about the bird, that is the birds that are there today with that of the Archaeopteryx. Because I told you the Archaeopteryx wings, actually at the tip of the wings they have claws, but nowadays birds, they don't have claws. So some dissimilarity is also there. So Some organisms show similarities and dissimilarities. When the olden days organisms show some similarities as well as dissimilarities when compared with the organisms that are dwelling on this earth today. And such similarities can be interpreted to understand whether the common ancestors were shared or not by looking at the similarities. So the best example I gave was that of the human beings with that of the monkeys or the apes, right? That is our fingers. Though we have 5 digits, monkeys, they have only 4 digits, right? But when you look at the anatomy of the finger or morphology of the fingers, they look almost similar. So that is how. So such similarities and all that makes us understand, or the shape of the skeleton, it is almost similar with that of the shape, the face. It is almost similar. The skeletal, the shape of a skull and all that is almost similar with that of the monkeys. So such evidences will make us understand whether human beings might have evolved from the monkeys or not. That is how. So such similarities helps us to understand or come to a conclusion whether there is a relationship between the present day organism with that of those organisms which are living in the previous era or with that of the ancestors. So that is the best example that we can give us of the whales, the bats, cheetah and the human. So all are mammals, right? Whales also, bats, cheetah and human, all are mammals. So these mammalian creatures, they share a similarity in the pattern of 4 limb. So imagine, where is whale, where is a human being? Morphologically, both are different, completely different, right? When you look at a whale, it is completely different. When you look at a human being, he is completely different. But anatomically, when you compare the 4 limbs, that is the bones that are present in the 4 limbs of human beings with that of the whales, bats, cheetah and all, they have a similarity. Likewise, each of these organisms, they are completely different to look like. But when you see the bone structure, it is almost similar in pattern. That is, especially the bones of the 4 limb, they are similar in pattern. So we shall study in detail how actually are they similar in spite of having morphological differences, how the bone of the 4 limb is of similar in the case of whales, bats, cheetah and human beings. So we shall study the anatomical and morphological evidences wherein we'll compare the pattern of bones of 4 limbs. Whom are we comparing the pattern of bones of the 4 limbs? So we are comparing between a whale, a bat, a cheetah as well as a human being, wherein all of them are mammalians. Though they are completely morphologically different, they have a similarity. We shall see about that. So there are 4 limbs. So 4 limbs actually perform different functions in all of these animals, right? In these animals, they perform different functions, but anatomically the structure is similar. That is called as homology, homologous organs. Homologous, homo means similar. Anatomically, they will be similar, but function is different. They are called as homologous organs. So, the whales, the bats, the cheetah and the human beings, they are dissimilar. That is dissimilar morphologically to look, they are completely dissimilar, but the anatomical characteristic of the 4 limb is similar, but the function is completely dissimilar. So such type of organs are called as homologous organs. So here we can see they have similar anatomical structure. So if we compare their 4 limbs, we shall see, but function is completely different. Say for example here, man, our 4 limb is our hands, right? Do we use our hands for like a whale? No. For what do we use our hands? We use our hands for doing all our daily chores or daily activity, right? But these cheetah, why do they use their 4 limbs? For running. Do we use our 4 limbs for running? No, we use our hind limbs, that is legs, for running. Now the function is different, right? Between cheetah and man. So here man's, you can see the 4, that is the hand of man, which is the 4 limb. This is the bone structure of hand of man. Cheetah, the 4 limb, that is the front legs of cheetah, 4 limb. Then whale, the flap, Whales have flaps at that is the flap, which is nothing but like a fin. They have huge flaps, right? Bats, this is the wing of bat, which is nothing but the forelimb. So here, if you look at the structure, they are almost similar because they are made up of same kind of bone. Like all of them have different types of bones such as humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals and phalanges in their forelimbs. So they have humerus bone in their forelimbs. All of these organisms, they have humerus bone in their forelimbs. They have radius bone in their forelimbs, ulna, carpals, metacarpals and phalanges. So all these bone structures are present in the forelimbs. So anatomically they are similar, but morphologically they are dissimilar, right? Morphologically, if you see, this is looking different, this is different, there is no comparison at all. But the type of bone that is present is same in all of these organisms forelimb. So anatomically, morphologically they are dissimilar. Anatomically they are similar because all these bones which I had mentioned, they all are present in all of these forelimbs, and function is different because I told you humans use their forelimb, that is hands, to perform all the daily activities such as eating, writing, all that, right? And cheetah, they use their forelimbs, that is their front legs, for running, right? And whale, they use their flippers or the large flaps for swimming, right? And bats, they also use them for flying. So function is different. So what are homologous organs? Those organs which are morphologically dissimilar and functionally dissimilar but anatomically similar. Such organs are called as homologous organs. So hence in these animals, the same structure developed along different directions due to adaptations. So it means that from where did the bones come? All these bones, they might have evolved from one particular organism, that is the bones of the forelimbs. That is anatomical evidences actually proves. Next, this is a kind of a divergent evolution, and these structures are homologous in nature. It is a divergent evolution because from one organisms, different organisms got evolved, but when we compare their forelimbs, they all are similar, therefore proving that they might have adopted some characters from a particular organism. So it is a divergent kind of evolution, but they are homologous in nature. So why homologous? They are structure, that is anatomically they are similar, that is why they are homologous, and they might have come from a common ancestry. That is, one common ancestor might have been there. From that, all these other organisms might have evolved. So they might have been a common ancestor. Common ancestor who also had these kind of forelimbs. So all these might have evolved from a common ancestor. So all these are just speculations, like guessing kind of works which scientists often do when we talk about evolution, because still today we have not got an correct insight into evolution. So that is why. So next, talking about plants, like that in plants also there have been some evolution related evidences, wherein we shall study about the pattern of thorn and tendril. So homology, what is homology? You have understood now. So pattern of thorn and tendril. Okay. So in plants, the thorn and tendrils of bougainvillea and cucurbit, they represent homology. So you can see bougainvillea. Bougainvillea are the thorny plants which produce beautiful shades of pink color flower. So they usually have thorn. Can you see here, from the internodal region or from the region, from the axis of the leaf, the thorn is arising. And here also the tendrils are also arising from the axis, right? But the thorn, if you see, morphologically they are dissimilar. Here morphologically they are dissimilar. Here also to look they are completely dissimilar. But their function is also completely dissimilar, right? So why function is, but their position from where they are arising in the plant, it is same. They are arising from the stem, between the stem and the petiole, right? Here also they are arising between the stem and the petiole. But here also the leaf got modified into a thorn. Here or the petiole will get modified into a thorn sometime. Here also sometimes the petiole gets modified into a tendril. So here. But look at the morphologically, they are completely dissimilar. That is with that of bougainvillea and cucumber. But in bougainvillea, it is thorns. So thorns are very hard and they are spiny in order to protect the plant from the predators, right? Their function is protection. But tendrils actually are present in climbers, which are very soft to touch. They are not hard and they help the plant to cling on to any of the that is stick or any of the walls or anywhere for support, or any other plant or tree for support, so that the climber can climb easily, right? Or it can grow properly. So though they have dissimilar function. So here also they might now understand. They might think that here also these two plants came from a common ancestor. Why? Looking at the position of the organ that it is present. So thorn is present at the between the stem and the petiole. Somewhere in between it will be formed. Tendrils also in cucumber the same way. So that is about plants, evidence for homology in plants. So next, talking about the enology. So homology, what did I say? They have similar, morphologically they are different, functionally, function is also different, but anatomy is similar. So I took the example of that is the bougainvillea with that of cucumber, and comparing that is different mammals. I took the example. Next, we'll talk about enology. So wherein we'll understand what is enology by comparing the wings of butterfly and birds. Here the organ is same. It is wings. We are talking about the wings of a butterfly and the wings of a bird, right? So wings of butterfly and birds, they almost look alike, don't they? They look almost alike. When looking at the shape and all that, it is almost similar. They are not anatomically similar. Function is also same. What is the function? Wings of a butterfly also help the insect to fly, and the wings of the bird also helps it to fly. To look also, it is almost similar. I'm not talking about with the feathers, but structurally they are similar, morphologically they are similar, but anatomically they are not similar. They are dissimilar structures, though they perform the similar function. So what is enology? Analogous or analogous organs. Analogous organs is nothing but those organs which are structurally or morphologically similar, and their function is also similar, but anatomically they are not the same, they are dissimilar, and the study of such analogous organs is called as enology. So these are the enology evidences. That is, the best example we took was wings of butterfly and birds, wherein they look alike. So hence, analogous structures are a result of convergent evolution. Here convergent evolution means they have evolved during different times, like the different structures evolving for the same function and hence having similarity, means during different times they would have evolved, but their function is same. Because they have evolved during different times, anatomically they are different, but the function is same. So they have this is the best example for convergent evolution, as well as it is the best example for enology. So this is about the homologous and the analogous organs, wherein we have learnt about the homology evidence and the enology evidence. So next, moving on to one more examples wherein we take the eye of the octopus and the mammals. So eye of octopus and mammals. So when we look at the eye of the octopus and other mammals, it is almost similar to look, right? Morphologically, they are similar to look. Function is also similar to see, right? They help in vision. So function is also similar. Whereas the anatomy, it is completely different. Anatomically, it is completely different, because octopus, who are the water dwellers, they have a different anatomical structure of the eye, whereas the terrestrial organisms will have a different structure of the anatomy of the eyes, right? So anatomically they are different. Likewise, the flippers of penguins and dolphins. So penguins also have flippers, right? What do the flippers help them to do? They help them to swim. Even dolphins also, their flippers help them to swim. To look also they are same. Morphologically also they are same. But anatomically, to look at the bone structure, it is completely different. So these are also some of the examples for analogy or analogous organs. Similarly, such the habitats in which the organisms are living has resulted in selection of similar adaptive features in different groups of organisms. So, organisms always evolve according to the habitat in which they are living. Imagine penguin, if it was not dwelling in a Antarctic region and not they would have not had this flippers and all that, right? They would have looked like the normal bird which are there. But organisms, they actually evolve according to the habitat in which they are living. So the best example that we can take of is that of the sweet potato and the potato. So sweet potato, the roots get modified, right? To look at both sweet potato and potato, where do you get that tuber like thing? Below the ground. They are below ground plants, right? So here their storage structures are present underground, but modification is completely different. So sweet potato, the roots are modified into tubers, whereas in potato the stem is modified into tubers. So sometimes the organs also play an important role in the evolution process depending on the habitat in which they are growing. So we have understood about this. So next, talking about one more evidence, that is biochemical evidences. So here the scientists, they take into consideration the proteins and the genes, and they try to find out what is the exact function of that particular gene, which protein it actually produces, and then they make a comparison. Say for example, I have an organism A and an organism B, both are completely different. But when they go in for genetic studies, they may find out that the gene that is producing a particular kind of protein in organism A is there is a same kind of gene which is producing the same kind of protein. So therefore, we might understand they might have come from a common ancestor. So that is how they try to find out the similarities between the proteins and the genes to find out whether they have come from a common ancestor or from one particular organism of a particular era or not. And these biochemical similarities actually helps us to understand whether they have shared the same structural similarities with that of the ancestor that are there, that were present during the earlier time. So that is how. So what they do is they try to extract the DNA from a fossil. Even from a fossil also they can extract the DNA. A small bit of a nail or anything that is available, from that they can extract the DNA. They'll try to compare it with that of the DNA of the present day organism. And if they find certain genes which are performing the same kind of function, that is producing the same kind of protein, they will try to form a connection between them and see whether they share a similarity with the ancestor or not. So that is how they do biochemical evidences. Next is breeding evidences. So breeding evidences, the best example that I can take here is of the maize or the corn. So earlier the maize that was there, it was not possible for the humans to consume it. Even with cooking also, people were not able to consume. So as the course of time passed, people started to do breeding techniques. So when they started doing breeding techniques, today what corn we have, that we can eat. Even we can eat it raw if it is tender, right? We can eat it raw. And cooking also, it will soften the kernels and we can eat it as such. But the wild corns that were present thousands of years ago, that was not at all consumable by the human beings. So that is how why this changed occur. It is because of breeding experiments that were done by humans. That is cross pollination, self pollination, all those kinds of artificial hybridization techniques, because of all that. So man has bred selected plants and animals for agriculture, for horticulture, and for sport or security. Even wild horses. Earlier wild horses, they were very tiny. They were not like the horses that we see now, well built. It is because of the breeding process and the course of evolution, it has changed completely, right? Even these dogs. So earlier dogs, it was completely different. But now because of the breeding process, now we have they breed a dog with that of the wolf, that is Alaskan wolf and all that, right? We have the best example is husky. We can take the example of a husky dog, right? So here man has domesticated many wild animals and crops. So wild animals, the best example you can take is of dogs. We get a variety of breeds now. But their origin was the wild animal, wild dog breeds itself, right? And I gave you the example of maize or corn, that how it was in olden days and how nowadays corn is available, how it is different. Likewise, so this extensive breeding program actually led to the formation of different types of breeds. The best example is dogs, but still are of the same group. So they all belong to the same group. Even wolf also belongs to a canine group itself, right? But they have bred between the different types of dogs, between the wolf, the dogs and all that. And nowadays dog that we see, we have different types of breeds which have come from the wild dogs itself. So this is about breeding evidences. So here, this is the best example for anthropogenic evidence wherein they studied moths during different periods. That is, one is 1850 and the other one was in the year 1920. So this is the best example for theory of natural selection. So here what happened was, during 1850 there was no much industrial development and all was not there. So therefore what you can see here, there are two types of moth. One is the white winged moth. This is white winged moth, and the other one is the dark winged moth. So here this is a tree. So here we can see a dark winged moth and the bark of the tree that is lighter in color. So a white winged moth is not that visible. The bark of the tree was lighter in color. So that same scientist, what he did was, after few years in 1920, industries and all started to develop. There was a lot of pollution and all that. When he came and observed, so he went to a particular area in the year 1850, he saw on a tree which was having light colored bark, he saw lots of dark winged moth, and also he saw white winged moth, but it was difficult for him to spot. Why? Because the white winged moth could properly camouflage with that of the light color of the light background of the tree. So he could easily find out. But to the same place he went in the year 1920, wherein industries and all had developed more. So he went for an survey. When he went, what he found was, he could see more number of that is a dark winged moth and light number of white winged moth. So there was a change. In 1850, more number of white winged moth were there and the dark winged moth reduced. Okay, in 1850. Why? Because here the bark of the tree was light in color, light shaded. So in light shaded, the white winged moth got camouflaged properly, whereas the dark winged moth under light shade. So anything under light shade, it is more visible, right? So say for example, here I have written this in black, right? It is in black color. Now background is white. What happens here? Because it is a contrast, I can read it correctly, tree trunk, because it is black is more prominent here, the color black. But imagine if I had written it in some light green or some very light pink or white color, will it be clearly visible? No, right? The same thing happened here also. The background, the bark of the tree was light in color. The brown moth was dark in color. Therefore, the predators such as birds and other animals, they were able to spot this brown moth clearly. They started feeding on them. Whereas white moth, because it was on a light background, the white moth could somewhat camouflage, therefore confusing the predator. So it survived more. But when he came in 1920, during the development of the industries and all that, he found out that there was more number of dark moth. Why? Because can you see the background of the tree? It became dark in color. So he found out that there was more amount of dark moth and less amount of white moth. Why? Because say for example black background, if I write in white color pen, it will be clearly visible. But if I write it in brown or black color, will it be visible? No, right? That is what happened here. Because the background was dark, the white colored moth having the white wing, actually it was easily visible to the predators. See how time changed, right? So here what happened, because of the industry, smoke and all that, a lot of soot got collected in the tree trunk. So because of that soot, that is soot is nothing but the black carbon kind of thing. So when you burn something, no, you get that soot, black mushy kind of carbon thing, right? So all those soot got collected on the tree trunk. So therefore the tree trunk became black in color or dark in color. Therefore the dark moth got camouflaged and the white moth got visible more. So that is how, so this is about anthropogenic evidences, how the environmental itself plays a role in the elimination of one particular organism and the survival of one particular organism. So here, because of the anthropogenic effect, so anthropogenic effect is because of human activities, the organisms will get extinct. Here, the population of the white moth got reduced because of the human activity, but in turn because of the human activity itself, the population of the dark winged moth became more. So this is called as anthropogenic effect. That is what we are doing nowadays, right? They say that sparrows, the best example we can take of sparrows. Imagine when we were small, during a childhood, we would find large number of sparrows. But nowadays, the number of sparrows has drastically come down, right? The one reason is they're not getting, because sparrows usually, they prefer these buildings, that is old houses with tiles. So nowadays we have concrete buildings, right? But earlier they used to have this tiles which were put on. So tiles, and the roofs were made with wooden, bamboo and all that. So they used to nest there. And also mobile phones, radiations and all were less during that time. But now all the houses have turned into concrete. The sparrows, they are becoming, they're not able to come and live in the houses or dwell with the humans by building nests in the houses and all that, because of the concrete buildings. And therefore they're becoming more prey to the predators, and also because of the radiation. Still evidences have not come out, but still they say that it is because of the radiations, mobile radiations that are there, the population of sparrows are coming down. Maybe, we don't know, but we know that the sparrow population which I used to see when I was a child, plus today, it has drastically changed a lot. So that is how we human beings ourselves, because of our selfishness towards the nature, some organisms, they completely get reduced in population, as well as they completely become extinct. Maybe because of our selfishness itself, sparrows might completely become extinct in another 10 years. We can't say. So that is how this is called as anthropogenic effect, because of the use of certain fertilizers, certain insecticides, because of the pollution, industrialization, because of all these, it leads to the extinction of certain organisms. And not just that, some of the organisms, in order to survive, they also evolve and survive according to the present day earth condition of the earth, how it is. So this is about anthropogenic effect. So these were the different evidences to prove how the organisms might have evolved, or evidences to prove evolution. So I hope you understood this chapter very well. So in the coming session, we shall discuss about what adaptive radiation is. So in order to survive in a particular environment, how the organisms, they themselves adapt and they evolve. So that we will study, and also we shall study about certain biological evolution, how biological evolution took place among different organisms. So we shall study about these two in the coming session. We shall meet again in the next session. Thank you.